In this video, we're going to talk about how we do our basic upper extremity splints. A splint is also called a soft cast. We use these sometimes for non-displaced distal radius fractures, other finger fractures, sometimes thumb fractures, and other hand fractures. And the way that we start this, a splint has 3 layers. The first layer is the soft cotton padding. The second layer is the plaster itself, and then we usually overwrap that with an ace bandage to hold everything together. So most of your forearm splints can kind of start the same way. You want to start at the wrist or at the hand, come around the thumb, and give yourself a pretty good layer of splinting material. And the more you can keep the wrinkles out of it, the less irritation you'll have on the skin and kind of the brownie points you'll get from your local orthopedist for making a nice splint. So you roll this about 2/3 of the way up the forearm. I usually overlap about 50%. I want to make sure I'm about 2 or 3 layers deep for the entire forearm. The simplest way to do most splints is, unlike a cast, what you want to do is actually roll out all of your plaster first. You kind of measure it to about the length of the forearm that you're going to use. Get rid of the rest of that. So about EA long. It does shrink a little bit after you get it wet. For a splint, typically I want 8 to 12 layers thick. I usually use 10 just to make it a nice even number. So this splint can be applied a variety of ways. If you have a wrist fracture and you don't leave a gap right there, you can just kind of gently put this up against the volar surface of the wrist. Mold this down a little bit and maybe wrap it with a reb roll to hold it on. If you have a thumb injury, or actually, let me go to this. If you have an ulnar injury, and it's an isolated ulnar injury, you can do what's called an ulnar gutter cast. This also works sometimes well for 5th metacarpal fractures. You bring the web roll down a little bit further, sometimes wrap just the 2 medial fingers by themselves, and this can go up against this border of the arm. If you have a thumb injury, which is fairly common as well, thank you, wrap the thumb into the construct as well as I can here. Hide that hole right there. Thank you.
Pretend it was already covered.
And then this can come up right along the radial border of the forearm and just gently wrap about halfway around the thumb. So now you've got your splint on. These take about 4 or 5 minutes to set, depending on how warm the water you use is. I prefer to use kind of cool water. The plaster can get very, very hot, so whatever you do, don't use hot water. You can actually give people pretty severe burns from just a splint like this. The padding helps as well. You can do a little bit of a mold here, make sure it's fitting nicely. And while it sets, you can go ahead and apply your ace bandage just to make it look pretty on top. But not tightly, just kind of roll it. It makes the splint look a little bit cleaner. Also, in kids, you want to keep it so they don't pick at it quite so much. And then you finish it off. There we have a thumb spica splint.